For 25 years, a lonely widow named Ruth received a birthday card from someone who signed only a friend. No name, no return address, just a few handwritten words of kindness that arrived without fail every single year on her birthday. She never knew who sent them, and when the cards finally stopped, the search for her mysterious friend would break the heart of an entire town. Ruth Callahan had lived alone in the small town of Rosewood for a very long time. She'd lost her husband young to an illness that took him far too soon, and the two of them had never been able to have children. And so, at an age when most people are surrounded by family, Ruth found herself entirely alone in the world. Her parents were gone, she had no siblings, the years stretched out ahead of her quiet and empty, and birthdays, which had once been happy occasions full of loved ones, became the loneliest days of all. A birthday, when you have no one, is a hard thing. It's a day that reminds you more than any other of just how alone you really are. Ruth's first birthday after her husband died was the worst day of her life. She spent it entirely alone in her small house, and not a single soul remembered. No cards came, no one called. She sat at her kitchen table that evening and wept, feeling as though she had simply vanished from the world, as though she could disappear entirely and no one would ever notice. But the next year, something arrived in the mail on her birthday. It was a simple card, the kind you'd buy at any drugstore. But inside, in careful handwriting, was a message. "Happy birthday, Ruth," it read. "The world is a better place for having you in it. Someone is thinking of you today and glad that you were born. With warm wishes, a friend." There was no name, no return address. Ruth turned that card over and over in her hands, mystified and deeply, deeply moved. She had no idea who could have sent it, but on the loneliest day of her year, someone, somewhere, had reached out to tell her that she mattered, and it meant more to her than that anonymous friend could ever have known. The next year, another card came, and the year after that. Every single birthday, without fail, a card arrived in Ruth's mailbox, always handwritten, always signed only a friend, always carrying a message that seemed to know exactly what her lonely heart needed to hear. "You are not forgotten, Ruth. The world would be dimmer without you. Someone is grateful today and always that you are here." Year after year, that quiet, faithful kindness arrived, and year after year it carried Ruth through the hardest day of her calendar. She tried over the years to figure out who it was. She asked around town discreetly. She examined the postmarks, which were always local from Rosewood itself. She studied the handwriting, but she never could solve it, and eventually she stopped trying because she came to feel that perhaps the mystery was part of the gift. Someone in Rosewood loved her enough to think of her every single year and asked for nothing, not even to be known or thanked. It was, Ruth often thought, the purest kindness she had ever encountered, and it sustained her. Through 25 long years of loneliness, the knowledge that she had a friend out there somewhere, faithful and unseen, was sometimes the only thing that got her through. The cards became the anchor of Ruth's life. As she grew older and lonelier still, and many of the few people she did know passed away or moved on, that one yearly card remained constant. Whoever her friend was, they never forgot, not once in 25 years. And Ruth came to love that unknown friend with all her heart, though she had no idea who they were. Then, one spring, on her birthday, the card didn't come. Ruth waited. She checked her mailbox again and again, certain it was only delayed. But the day passed, and the next, and the next, and no card arrived. For the first time in 25 years, her birthday came and went without a word from her faithful friend. And Ruth, now an old woman herself, felt a cold dread settle over her heart, because she knew what it likely meant. 25 years of perfect faithfulness didn't simply stop for no reason. Something had happened to her friend.
And so Ruth Callahan, who had spent 25 years wondering about her mysterious benefactor, finally set out in earnest to find them, not to thank them now, but out of a desperate worry and a need to know. It wasn't easy. The cards had been anonymous by design, and 25 years is a long time, but Ruth was determined. She took her whole collection of cards, for she had saved every single one, to the Rosewood post office, and she asked the postmaster, an old friend, if there was any way to trace where they'd come from. Together they studied the postmarks and the handwriting, and it was the handwriting, in the end, that led them. The postmaster, who had worked in that little office for 40 years and knew half the town by their penmanship, looked at those careful letters and went quiet. "I know this hand," he said slowly. "I'd know it anywhere. This is old Walter Hensley's writing, the farmer out on Cedar Road." Ruth was stunned. Walter Hensley. She knew the name vaguely, a quiet old farmer who lived alone at the edge of town, but she had never truly known the man. She'd perhaps exchanged a dozen words with him in her entire life. Why on earth would a near stranger have sent her birthday cards faithfully for 25 years? Filled with questions and a growing dread, Ruth drove out to Walter Hensley's farm. But when she arrived, she found the farmhouse dark and a neighbor tending to the animals. And the neighbor told her the news that broke her heart. Old Walter had passed away 3 weeks before, quietly in his sleep, just before Ruth's birthday. Ruth stood in that farmyard and wept for a man she had barely known, but who she now understood had been her dearest and most faithful friend for a quarter of a century. And it was the neighbor, and later the few folks in town who'd known Walter, who slowly helped her piece together the answer to the mystery that had shaped her whole life. Walter Hensley had been a widower too. He'd lost his own wife many years ago, and like Ruth, he'd had no children and had lived out his life largely alone. He understood loneliness. He knew intimately how cruel a birthday can be when you have no one. And so, 25 years ago, the neighbor recalled Walter mentioning it once, long ago, the old farmer had heard through the small-town grapevine about the young widow across town who had spent her first birthday after her husband's death entirely alone, with no one to remember her. The story had stuck with Walter. It had touched something deep in his own lonely heart, and quietly, telling no one, he had decided to do something about it. He would make sure that this woman, this stranger who understood the same loneliness he did, never spent another birthday feeling forgotten. So every year, for 25 years, the old farmer bought a card and sat at his kitchen table and carefully wrote a few words of kindness to a woman he barely knew. He signed it only "a friend" because he never wanted thanks, never wanted recognition, never wanted anything at all except to know that somewhere across town, on her loneliest day, a lonely woman would open her mailbox and feel remembered. He did it faithfully, in secret, for 25 years, and he'd only stopped when death itself finally stopped him. But the story had one more piece, and it was the piece that undid Ruth completely. Among Walter's belongings, the neighbor had found something, a card, already written, already addressed to Ruth, sitting on the old farmer's kitchen table, ready to be mailed. He had written it before he died, that year's birthday card, prepared in advance, as he must have done every year. He simply hadn't lived long enough to send it. The neighbor pressed it gently into Ruth's trembling hands. Ruth opened it there, weeping, and read the last words her faithful friend would ever write to her. "Happy birthday, Ruth," it said, in that careful, familiar hand. 25 years now I've been sending these, and you've never known who I was, and that's just how I wanted it. But I'm an old man now, and I don't know how many more of these I've got left in me. So in case this is one of the last, I wanted to tell you something true. I started sending these because I heard you were lonely, and I knew that loneliness myself, and I couldn't bear the thought of you feeling forgotten. But somewhere along the way, thinking of you every year, Wishing you well became one of the great joys of my own lonely life. You never knew me, Ruth, but you gave an old man a reason to pick up his pen every year, a person to care about, a small good thing to do in a quiet life. So thank you. Thank you for letting me be your friend, even from a distance, even unknown. It was my honor. With all my warm wishes, now and always, your friend, Walter. Ruth Callahan sat down right there and wept as she had not wept in 25 years, because she understood at last the full truth of it. She had spent all those years believing that a kind stranger had been carrying her through her loneliness, and that was true, but what she hadn't known was that she had been carrying him too, that the faithful kindness had gone both ways all along, two lonely old souls, each easing the other.